welcome you all to our Specialisterne webinar. So looking at neurodiversity. My name is Marybeth Hosking. I'm the CEO of W4STEM, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speakers today. We have Vicky Little. Vicky is the COO of Specialisterne Australia, and through her role enables organisations to access, embrace, and integrate skilled autistic and neurodivergent individuals into the workplace via alternative recruitment pathways, capacity building and education. She's absolutely passionate about empowering and educating employers to create truly neural inclusive workplaces that understand, support and embrace neurodiversity. Welcome, Vicky.
Thanks so much for having me today.
My pleasure. Our next panelist is Chris Skipper-Conway. Chris is the chair of Women for STEM and believes that businesses thrive when they fully understand that as a community, everyone has diverse needs and individuals flourish in inclusive environments when they're valued, included, and have growth opportunities. Great to see you again, Chris.
Yes, I am.
And our final speaker is Ruth Bonser. Ruth has worked in IT for over 20 years and currently works in the mainframe team at Westpac as an infrastructure services manager. She was hired by Westpac through a highly successful neurodivergent hiring program called Tailored Talent, run by Specialisterne in 2017. Welcome, Ruth.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. All right, we're going to get cracking straight away. Please, if you have questions for the panelists, pop those into the chat. We'll be monitoring that. If we've got some time at the end, we will get to those questions. And Specialisterne will provide us with some more information towards the end, so that if you want to reach out to Vicky or the team at Specialisterne, you'll have that opportunity. But let's get cracking into these questions. I think this is going to be an amazing panel. And Chris, I wanted to start with you, if you don't mind. So, Women for STEM and what it is that we do. So how does diversity, equity and inclusion support the needs of neurodiverse in an organisation? How important is this concept of belonging?
So from organisations and from a community perspective, we've actually really done quite well in the DEI perspective. And when I say quite well, we haven't reached where we want to be, but we've brought in race and gender. But it's really sad because one of the areas we have not touched on is the significant benefit that having neurodiversity candidates in our workplace actually amplifies not only what organizations are doing, but we as a country and those individuals are doing. So they bring an enormous wealth to an organization in some ways that we probably don't understand how beneficial they are. They're the creative thinkers. They elevate productivity. They really give us a view of different perspectives. And when I say that, we've got to understand that the ABS have just released data to say that about 30 to 40% of our population are neurodivergent. So if you leave them out of the equation, you've lost part of your opportunity. How can you support neurodiversity? Really, you've got to genuinely support diversity, inclusive, and an equitable culture, but you have to make people belong. And that's the aspect that the neurodivergent candidates are saying is, even when they get into an organisation, they don't always feel, and often don't feel at all, as if they belong. So we've got to understand that it's a really complex condition, if you like, but it's part of 40% of our population. And it's up to us as organisations to understand the breadth and depth of it, and that way to understand how we can bring our learning, how can we bring our environments. In other words, let them belong.
Lovely. Oh my God, so true. Absolutely so true. So I wanted to direct this next question through to Ruth and to Vicky. why is a clear understanding of neurodiversity important for hiring managers and employees? I know we've got some hiring managers on the call today. So, Ruth, can I direct this to you to start with?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I think that one of the key concepts of neurodiversity is really that we're saying there's not one single kind of way of thinking. That we're thinking in all sorts of different ways, and this diversity of approach of how we think is fundamentally a benefit in any company. I mean, I think everybody's been in the past think outside the box. Well, this is a whole group of people who are by default thinking outside the box. So how can we make sure that hiring managers understand neurodiversity, because otherwise we're missing out on people that we need for that different way of thinking before they even had the chance to arrive. And I think there are cues that you can see in the way you advertise a role. There are cues that you can see, or there are approaches that you can bring to how you interview for a role. All of those steps along the way, you want to make sure you haven't excluded anybody without even realizing it. And I'm not an expert in what all of those best practices are. I'm more talking as a neurodivergent person, saying I'm going to opt out if it feels like it's not going to be safe or it's not going to be a place I belong. And then you're going to miss out on what I might bring to the team if that's something you're looking for. Vicky's going to be able to actually have a better idea of how do you make sure you don't accidentally have people opt out.
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, just to add to what Ruth is saying, I think one thing I always say is that the strongest indicator of success of a neurodivergent employee is an understanding manager. At the end of the day, it is almost that simple, because understanding and capacity building and awareness is the key. If every manager took the time to understand neurodiversity, but particularly and more importantly to understand their neurodivergent employees, then every individual would have the chance to succeed, because they would be given a chance to talk about how they work best, how they learn best, how they process information, what communication preferences they have, and what sort of environment works for them to succeed. And that is the nature of which, it's good management, it's good communication skills. So it comes down to good leadership. So I'm really passionate about ensuring that at Specialisterne, we're really, ensuring that managers get the training and understanding that they need, and adopt an understanding of neurodiversity as a whole, but understanding how to support all your employees. So we operate under this universal design concept, in that what is good for one person, what is good for one neurodivergent individual is actually good for all. And we hear it time and time again from managers that we've worked with, is that if you hire neurodivergent employees or have a neurodiverse workforce, and the supports that you put in place to support that individual or those individuals is actually ends up being good for everyone and benefits the entire team. And so we come down, that's why at Specialisterne we're really focusing on ensuring that we're educating as many people as possible.
Oh, I love that. I love that, because a lot of managers might be sitting there thinking, it's just so much. It's a minefield. I don't know where to start. And if I've got that, where to start? And I guess that leads me on to the next question, which I wanted to ask Ruth, is that, so what, I know you came through the Tailored Talent Program into your organization, but what are the first steps and other organization should take to create a more neurodiverse environment, neuro-inclusive environment, in your opinion?
I think I would say if you haven't heard of universal design, which is what Vicky mentioned, then step one should be go out and find out about universal design. Fundamentally, it's about designing the way you do things by challenging all of your assumptions early on about how you can do it so it works for everyone. Are there people who can't use the process or the product as it is? Then challenge if that's the only way you can do it. And I think a lot of the time you can find this universal design approach, there can be some really easy wins. Things like having captioning available for everybody in a Teams or Zoom call. Nobody has to ask. Nobody has to tell anyone that they're using it, and everybody can immediately use it, and that can meet a whole bunch of different needs. I also think the other really easy universal design approach everybody can add with almost no effort is to ask people what they need. And you don't have to do that in a confrontational one-on-one way. You can do that by adding it into your people management structures. When you have performance management every year, or when you have your fortnightly check-in, put in a question saying, is there anything you need? Is there anything that's an obstacle to you doing your best work? And that simple question can really be a massive help for people to actually get the supports, because not every neurodivergent person is the same. Some people are going to be highly sensory and need less input because they'll want to wear their noise cancelling headphones to block out all the extra noise. But other people thrive on having more input and actually find that it energizes them, and they struggle if they don't have enough. So you can't just make an assumption and say everybody needs this. The concept is to say, what do you need, and how can we create an environment where everybody can get what they need and thrive?
I love that, because that's that consultative approach, isn't it? It's let's consult, let's ask, let's stop assuming we know. You know, we may, and I think as leaders, we really do need to stop the assumptions and really sit back and ask the question. That is how we make our environments, make people feel like they belong, because we actually are saying to them, we are here with you on the journey. Yeah. Thank you, Ruth. That was great. So this is something that I think everybody on this call is really keen to know. What kind of workplace, and I know, Ruth, you touched on it a little bit there, but what kind of workplace accommodations or adjustments are often necessary to support neurodiverse employees effectively? Vicky, I might start with you on this, if you don't mind. I am changing the structure slightly differently from the run sheet, ladies, just so you are aware. Purely just to give Ruth, you a moment to just regroup, and Vicky, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just to follow on from what Ruth said so well, I think at the end of the day, you know, it's about asking the person. We love the acronym ATP because it is sometimes that simple. Ask the person, because at the end of the day, they are the experts of their own experience. However, some people who receive late diagnosis, and we hear this time and time again, may not know yet exactly what it is that they need for support. Or how they work best, because it's the unraveling of a new diagnosis and it's putting back the pieces of the puzzle again to understand how they do work best. So that's where things like having a neurodiversity coach, someone who specializes in that topic, in that area, to work with the employee. But that's where I think, you know, it's about asking the individual what it is that they need to work best. And I would like to share this great statistic that 60% of workplace adjustments cost nothing, because I do believe that there's a fear of the unknown, a fear of, oh, this is going to cost me too much, or this is going to be, you know, there's a lot of fears of the unknown. But at the end of the day, the most common adjustments that we see across the board, as Ruth said, everyone's different, but the most common requests are noise cancelling headphones, which once again has become a bit of the norm. Clear instructions, which I would argue that everyone needs. Having access to a buddy when they first start, once again, that's just good practice for any employee. Having regular structured one-on-ones in the diary. So that might be weekly or fortnightly, but a chance to ask questions, a chance to touch base. So structured one-on-ones, once again, that's just good management practice. And good old flexible working and the capacity to work from home. It may not be working from home all the time, but I've been working in this space for 18 years and I've been advocating for flexible working for autistic and neurodivergent employees for this amount of time. And thanks to the good old pandemic that we had, it proved that every employee also values flexible working and in fact work really well from home. And so the capacity to, for example, come in early and leave a little bit early to avoid the public transport peak hour, things like that. It's small adjustments that make the world of difference to a lot of neurodivergent individuals. And the final thing I think that we miss is the environment. The environmental piece is just as important as having an understanding manager. Each environment and sensory sensitivities for each individual will be very different, but that's why it's important to ask the person and working with them to create an environment around them where they feel comfortable, because sensory sensitivities, if, for example, an autistic person experiences sensory sensitivity to light, that can feel like pain, physical pain. And so we really need to be acknowledging that this is really important to get right, really important to find out how they work best, what their sensitivities might be, and what environment they work best. So commonly, we're seeing more quiet spaces available in all workplaces, and that's once again an easy change to make. You might already have them in the form of a phone booth, but something like that, or a library. Those spaces where there's a sort of a desensitized environment where people can have some quiet space, it really makes the world a difference. So all of those adjustments, like as you can see, just benefit most people.
Thank you, Vicky. Ruth, did you want to add anything onto that?
I wanted to add on, which is also adding to your free list of things that cost nothing. I think that part of what's an effective accommodation or adjustment is not connecting it to any specific diagnosis. I think that neurodivergent people are not all aware of it day one when they're born. And that means you might have people who haven't realised yet that they're neurodivergent, but will still greatly benefit from having supports and adjustments in place. And I think part of that is, as a manager, being really open and inviting of feedback in terms of how you communicate, in terms of what your processes are, all of that sort of stuff. So, if I'm really going to have a better meeting by getting the information beforehand, and my manager doesn't know that, how do I communicate that so that they'll hear me in a way that will result in that actually changing, even if it's not something they need or they understand the need for? Do they need to understand it themselves? As Vicky said, the lights being painful for some people is not a common experience for all people. So, seeing your employee team feedback as a gift rather than as an irritation. They're giving you the world through their eyes, but you can't see it that way otherwise. And so even if they ask for something you can't change, if you respectfully listen and value the contribution that they're giving when they give you that feedback, I think that is neuro-inclusive as well.
That's belonging. That's belonging. And you said it so eloquently. That is exactly what belonging is. And I love that. And there was a comment by one of the attendees, Robin, said, this is so much common sense. Why is it not done for everyone? It's not difficult to be person-centered versus task-centered. Everyone has strengths, some of which are undiscovered, and that is so true. And that's what we're hopefully going to be able to provide you today, with some tangible takeaways that you can actually implement in your own workspaces and your workplaces, your organizations, which is so important. So this is for all of my panelists, and I'm going to direct this to you, Chris, to start with. I will give the other speakers a little bit of a break there. So what training or education should be provided to employees and managers to foster a neuro-inclusive workplace and create, and this is this culture of belonging again. Chris, what do you think? You're on mute, Chris. Chris, you're on mute. The catch cry of the pandemic.
Okay.
You're now, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Sorry. The why for me empowers the managers. And if you think about the benefits that a neurodiverse community brings to an organization, is they often go into far more detail. They often translate information very, very quickly. But what we don't do is, if we don't tell those benefits to the manager, then the manager doesn't understand why it is so critical that we actually create an environment of belonging. But in order to create that environment of belonging, I think Vicky and Ruth will agree that it's quite a complex understanding, and we really need to enlighten the managers. So if we don't explain what sort of conditions may actually be created in our environment unintentionally, so what we've got to do is get familiar with the spectrum, and really with the team build empathy building exercises. And we've got to rethink the way we communicate. I actually asked a neurodivergent young lady who's doing a business coaching course, and I said to her, what's important to you? And she said to me, I'll send it to you in an email. And she sent me an Excel spreadsheet. I want to be able to wear my headphones. I actually need a quiet space. I really like it when I can work in an enclosed space so I don't feel vulnerable. And I want to, when I do feel that I've put all that energy in and I want to have a bit of a meltdown or a quiet time, give me a quiet space. And she actually gave me this template that she uses and gives to who's ever employing her. So I think what we've got to think is we communicate with our voices, we hear, but other people do it differently. And other people, that sensory stuff that Vicky and Ruth have been talking about is really, really important to them. But I also think what I love about what you're doing is that if we create peer networks, buddy groups, where they actually have a buddy that they can go to and say, I really want to talk to you about this. I want to understand how I can better do this. Or I'm finding this a little difficult, because we all understand things in a different way. So I think that the biggest mistake organizations are doing is not giving that leadership training, that management training. And it's got to be from the top down.
Yes.
Can't drive it from the top, can't just put it in policies. Give it a voice, but give it the actions.
Absolutely. Vicky, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what Chris has said, that leadership training is key. And I think more importantly, it's beyond just the 1 hour session about neurodiversity in general, because it's such a huge topic. And yes, that is important foundational information, but it's then having sessions that build on that knowledge for leaders and deep diving into practical strategies that could help, and giving leaders the chance to ask the hard questions where they don't normally have a space to ask that, perhaps, you know, work through particular challenges or understand it at a deeper level from the perspective of perhaps they've already got a neurodiverse workforce and they're working through understanding them. I think it's having accessible training that is regularly available for anyone who enters a leadership position. And I think it's important to, I agree, having the option for neurodivergent employees to also have the access to professional development training and that buddy system or that cohort support from one another. So the most success that we see is when there is built-in support for the current workforce, and probably Ruth can talk about that as well, about what they've achieved at Westpac with that. But in terms of what we see the most successful of what we do at Specialisterne, it's certainly that deep dive manager training and having that readily available to managers whenever they need to access it, because the prevalence is 1 in 5. 1 in 5 people in Australia are neurodivergent. So without a doubt, you are already supporting, managing, working alongside a neurodivergent employee. So that training needs to be something that's accessible at all times, because we're only going to see an increase in awareness and an increase in prevalence in every single workforce. And it's critical that managers build that level of understanding.
Ruth, did you want to add?
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with what everybody said about that top down, but I think that it needs to be complemented with the connectivity of the community of neurodivergent people themselves. So, you know, a lot of people don't disclose at work. They don't want the discrimination. They don't want to stand out, and they don't want to feel judged or criticised simply for being themselves. And I don't think that's unique to being neurodivergent. I think that's true for any minority. But, you know, when you're neurodivergent, you're often masking all day long to pretend that you're not. And that's exhausting and hard. And it makes you doubt yourself. And I think one of the things that helps, you know, from an education kind of point of view is being able to connect with others and understand the shared experiences. Is this what everybody is experiencing. Is this reasonable for me to ask? I want this thing, I want to communicate in writing and not in a phone call. Is that okay? Is that okay for me to want that? Or am I being unreasonable? Am I being too imposing? And I think you have to create safe spaces where people can connect with each other without it being visible to everybody, with it just being visible to their own community. And at Westpac, I'm the chair of our employee resource advocacy group, and we've created a closed forum. And it's within a Teams channel where you can join it simply by saying that you are neurodivergent and you want to be there. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to ask. But part of asking is agreeing that you're going to treat everybody else's communications in there appropriately, professionally, confidentially. And that the goal of that is to try and capture some of that feeling of having peers who get you, having people at work who are part of your people. And it's an experience I had as part of the Specialisterne Tailored Talent Program, that we were in a group and there was a whole group of us who all were going through the same experience. And that gives you so much support and helps you figure out stuff that there isn't necessarily formal education to answer those questions.
Yeah. I wanted to we have a question that's come through, and there's a lovely little chat going on with people in the room, and I know I'm going off script a little bit, so please do indulge me. But Supri just shared something that she struggles with open floor plans, finds it really overwhelming, and it increases her sensory overload. And she wanted to know if anyone has any tips. And there's some lovely tips in there, but I was wondering, either Vicky or Ruth, did you have any short tips? I'll give you a minute each, just a short tip that might help Cyprian and anyone else that's struggling in that open, well, I mean, all offices are open floor plan predominantly, unless it's an older building. So any thoughts? Vicky?
Look, I'll just quickly pass to Ruth, but I know from our neurodiversity coaches who work with neurodivergent employees and their managers in the workplace to offer the support and coaching to thrive, it is essential that if there is open plan offices, that they have the same desk. None of this hot desking, because the stress that comes with moving around and having a different desk every day is so, it will be such a disadvantage for that individual to do their work. So perhaps if there is an open floor plan approach and that person is comfortable to choose a desk and have that same desk, that might help. But then obviously putting in place strategies, so there's noise cancelling headphones, taking regular breaks to the quiet zone. And then this is where flexible working comes into place. So if you knew that you only had to come in one day, maybe two, to be in that environment to your desk. And yeah, I think it's about the individual saying and speaking up for what they need, and then the manager listening, because it's things like the lights that you can't necessarily control. But I've heard some of our employer partners say they are able to control them. It's just a case of pushing beyond the normal request and making sure that it does happen. So it takes a listening ear from the manager and pushing past what is previously seen as, oh yeah, no, that's beyond what we are able to do. No, let's challenge that and try and help our individuals thrive. Because at the end of the day, perhaps if those lights are too offensive and really challenging for a neurodivergent individual, there's a chance it's affecting a lot of people. Over to you, Ruth.
I would say two different things. On the one hand, I'd say that's really hard. That's hard to solve, and there's not a simple, easy, you just do X and it'll solve it answer. But a lot of workplaces do have some sort of formal process where you can raise a concern or raise a suggestion, and I think it's always worth doing that, because if none of us say anything, then the people who have the power to change stuff never know that it's a problem for anybody. So it is a good idea to do that if there's a process. In terms of what I as an individual can do, I think part of that is about trying to understand the people I have the power to ask for help, what they can do and what I can reasonably ask of them. And in an open plan office, my personal approach is usually get there as early as you can and pick the desk that you find the most comfortable. And figure out, what is it about the open plan that you're finding challenging? Is it that you're near people moving around physically near you? Is it that you can feel that they're at your back and that actually gives you a sense of anxiety? what is it about it that's making you feel that it's challenging? And then think about, give in the parameters of the open office that you're allowed to make choices within. How can you try and minimize that with your choice? You know, I guess I bring a bit of a mathematical or technology thinking when I try to approach this stuff, and I tend to think about it as, how can I isolate the problem into small pieces and then deal with each of those small pieces one at a time as best I can to minimize it. And other people might say it differently, but you know, I'll finish off before I hand back by just saying my other approach to this is to ask other people in the company how they're dealing with it. Maybe they know something about a quiet room I don't know about that I could be using.
Yes, it's that. But I'm going to throw this out there, and I've got one more question for the panel, and then I'm going to, because we are running slightly out of time. But if you don't feel like you belong, you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to ask, you don't want to say any of those things, and there's that panic and that discomfort, and the whole intent is we want everyone to feel like they belong. So if you need to have these conversations, you should feel that you can, but that's not always the case. This is my last question to Chris. I'll start with you and then I'll throw to Vicky. So this is important. How can hiring managers and people and culture teams design recruitment processes to be more inclusive of all candidates, with that creating that universal hiring practice that suits everyone? Chris, do you want to start?
So I'm going to be a bit controversial, and most of you know me that I usually do that. But I really think the recruitment processes need to be turned on their head. They're quite aged. We haven't amended them to actually make them more inclusive, to make people belong. And what we need to think about is that, do we have a diverse hiring team? Have we tried other ways to bring the best person to the environment? Does it have to be the CV? Not everybody communicates that way. Does it have to be that eliminating phone call? And then the next thing is, at the interview, is it going to be, can you bring a buddy with you so that you feel comfortable? We really have not changed the way we recruit. And from someone who ran a recruitment company, I think shame on us.
Yeah. And I'm getting so much in the chat, Chris, about that. Vicky, you want to add?
Well, I think, yeah, we completely agree, Chris. You know, a Specialisterne, you know, we're disrupting the recruitment process every day, because exactly that, the traditional recruitment process is not supportive of neurodivergent individuals, of a lot of individuals actually, because it's still heavily reliant on things like the resume, which is definitely full of bias, and the interview, which is assessing one's capacity to communicate, be sociable, you know, interact with nonverbal communication, and to sell yourself. And it's all going to be the skills that are not necessarily innate to a neurodivergent individual. And you're up against, you know, a competitive candidates who might be able to, you know, perform really well in that interview. And so we're trying to remove the interview. We don't believe that that's a good assessment of any neurodivergent individual. We believe in flipping that on its head, as Chris said, and turning it into something more practical, something more hands-on, something where it's showing someone's capacity to do the job over a period of time. Because, for example, autistic people need time to process, time to show what they can do, time to understand the job, time to meet the manager, time to see the environment. These short interviews and these short interactions with the company before the company decides whether they're the right fit is not right for the individual, and they might end up getting the job, but it may not be right for them, and that can be, you know, even more detrimental. So we believe in companies, we support companies, to think differently, think about universal design all the way through, right from the beginning, from the job ad, the job description, the entire process of which you're assessing your candidates. Think about it from a neurodiverse lens. And, you know, to Chris's point, you know, we need to be bringing in neurodivergent individuals into that process, to advise on that, to be part of the decision making. By doing that, I think you'll see more talent come through from all communities, not just the neurodiverse community, because it's allowing people to show what they can do. It's allowing them to move beyond what we've been relying on for so long, which is that resume and that interview. And, you know, then if you look at it, you know, the Specialisterne percentage retention rate, of doing it that way, of doing the inclusive recruitment process, is sitting at around 94%. So we know that that process does work for the neurodiverse community and for everybody because of that retention rate.
Yes,
Can I
we
add
do.
one more thing?
Yes, Ruth, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to say one of the things that I think both of you alluded to, but maybe didn't explicitly say, is that flipping it on its head is about focusing on people showing their strengths as the process. It's not about coming up with reasons to rule people out who are interested and end up with the last man standing. It's about letting everybody who's interested show their strengths. And when you see them all, who looks like they're a great fit, who looks like they're going to be able to join and do good stuff. And sometimes it's not the obvious candidate from the gate, because you've let them lean into their strengths.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That is exactly right. It is not it is the last man standing. It's like Survivor, isn't it? Outwit, outsmart, outplay. We are mindful of the time. It is 10 to 1. And I wanted to throw to you, Vicky, to talk a little bit about Specialisterne and what sort of support you offer. If anyone would like to engage with your organisation, we do have a couple of questions. If we can get to those after your little spiel, that would be great. A couple of minutes with you, Vicky.
Great, thank you. So look, as I've sort of alluded to throughout this call, we have done, you know, recruitment is what we've been known for, is partnering with employers to create those inclusive hiring programs to help show the talent that is within the neurodiverse community that may not be making it through that recruitment process. However, more so these days, we're seeing that the focus is on building a neuro-inclusive workplace. And I couldn't agree more with that approach, because you need to build a safe place for people to have that sense of belonging, to feel understood, where they're going to thrive, before you can focus on bringing in people intentionally. We still see a focus on recruitment for those organisations who may have already done the work, and that's excellent. So we're seeing progression. But most of our work then is focused on the training and education piece, like I said before, because we really want to, you know, our goal is to enable 12,000 careers for neurodivergent individuals by 2030. And we're only going to do that by the awareness raising, like we said, building capacity of leadership, raising awareness across all organisations in Australia. And so the other addition to that, and like I said, we're seeing a lot of this as a request, is that neurodiversity coaching. So one of the things that we know neurodivergent employees really need is someone who understands them. So it's a coach who can come in, who's external to the workplace, who is neurodivergent themselves or understands neurodiversity, to support them with perhaps areas that they might be feeling challenged in. There might be things happening outside of work, which means it's impacting their current job. And so it's just someone to support them along the way. We call it enablement. And at the same time, we're also enabling the manager, because as I've said all along, the manager is key. So to support the manager in understanding how to support that employee and any neurodivergent employee that they might support in the future. So that coaching is really popular, because there might be general supports out there, but we know that neurodivergent individuals need someone who really understands them. And we also offer lots of advisory services as well in terms of building that neuro-inclusive workplace, things like assessments to determine your maturity in terms of neuro-inclusion, and, you know, anything that's going to help organisations build the tools and resources to be neuro-inclusive through every, you know, every process, every policy within their organisation. So that's what we do. We're here to support all neurodivergent individuals to find meaningful careers, because to us, the key word is meaningful. It's not just about getting somebody into any job. It's using their strengths, it's using their skills in a way that's meaningful for them within an understanding employer. That's what we're about as Specialisterne.
Thank you. That is amazing. And we're right on time, and we do have a little bit of time for questions. And Andrea popped something in, which I think is it's a decent question to ask. How can we encourage leadership to prioritise neurodiversity, especially among those from older generations who may not see its significance? Who would like to field that? Chris?
I just wanted to pick up what probably what's just been put into the chat, is that the success rates when you deploy in neurodivergent candidates within your organizations, it has already been proven. The benefits both to the individual and to the company are there. And there are companies that Vicky will tell us about, Ruth's already told us about, but you know, the EYs, the Salesforces, they're all doing it. If we don't do it within our own organization, we're going to be left behind. Sorry.
You're absolutely right. But there's that. So I think if we go back to that question, you know, how do I engage a leader to say, hey, this is important? Data, you've got the data to back you up. We know that if we create inclusive work environments and everyone feels that they belong, then we know that this is going to be good overall for our organizations. And that's a really powerful conversation, Andrea, to have with your boss. Ruth, did you pop your hand up? Do you want to add something to that?
I wanted to add something to Andrea's question, which is, I think there are two tools that a lot of companies have in place that help with this. One of them is having an employee advocacy group or resource group, which is a group of employees advocating for a particular, usually a particular minority. And there can be different groups in your workplace, but if you're in a larger place, a lot of them have that. And that's a great place to go and have an amplified shared voice on these issues. The other thing is a lot of companies have a disability action plan or a access and inclusion plan in place, which is the way that they make their public commitments around how they're going to support individuals who have a disability or who need access and inclusion supports. And that's another great place that fits in with the business case stuff that Chris and everybody is talking about here. There's a clear business case for it, but you as just an individual aren't going to go around telling your executives about it. So these two tools can both be a good pathway to be able to help amplify that importance.
And it brings back that and I hope that everyone's seen this sort of thread of belonging that we've tried to put all the way through in this webinar. I think that it is, it's really important in a workplace. You can be a great place to work, but there may be still people that don't feel as if they belong. And that is really where we want to get ourselves to. I think that's exactly where we want. I've got a lot of people that are thanking us very much for this. Vicky, did you have a slide you wanted to share with us? So if people can, if they want to get some more information on Specialisterne?
I'll bring that up for you now.
That would be great. So please do feel free to take a snapshot of the screen. Fantastic. So if you want to take a quick snapshot of that screen there, you can get in touch with Vicky or the team at Specialisterne if you want some more information, both for managers as well as for the individual. So Specialisterne work with everybody. So an incredibly inclusive organization. I want to say one thing before I thank everybody and let you all go. I met Michelle Crawford at Tech Diversity Dinner, which is also a really lovely event that Women for STEM we work very, very closely with those teams. And when I met Michelle and she told me what Specialisterne does, I just thought, we have to do a webinar. We have to highlight this great work, because I don't know if anybody knows that these resources are available to you, and that's really important. So thank you so much. I hope everyone's gotten a shot of that. Would you mind unsharing now, Vicky, and I'll close this session out. We will be sending out an email follow-up just so this for all of the attendees. It has absolutely been my pleasure to facilitate this discussion. I would like to thank Ruth Bonser, Chris Skipper-Conway, Vicky Little. If you've got any further questions, please do feel free to either reach out to Vicky or myself or any of us at Women for STEM or at Specialisterne. Thank you for your questions, your engagement. This has been an amazing event. We will have the recording available and we'll advise when that is so. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to close us out. Thank you. Another wonderful Women for STEM collaboration with another amazing organisation, Specialisterne. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ruth.
It's fun.
Thank you so much.
If we can stop that recording. Hopefully.